Yes. We'll do one presentation and then, yeah. Okay. Very good. What we got here? We're ready to go. All right, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. We appreciate everybody being here for the Wednesday, July 2nd, Harriman City Planning Commission, a regular Planning Commission meeting. We'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance, and if I'm reading this right, it's Rock. Come on forward. Thank you. Go ahead and come forward here and lead us in the pledge. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Rock. All right. We do have a full quorum tonight. Appreciate everybody being here. Just ask if there's any conflicts of interest for any of the items on the agenda tonight. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 3.4, which is approval of our minutes for the June 4th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. Man, we're up to date. Look at that. It's fantastic.
I'll make a motion to approve item 3.4.
Okay, we have a motion by Heather.
Second.
A second by Forrest. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move on to item 4.1. Review and consideration of an extension. Clint.
I'm going to try to make this as short as the motion will take. So this is an extension for the Walker family subdivision. It was approved back in 2021. We received its first extension in 2023, and then this will be its final extension in 2025. So they'll have one more year after this meeting to record the subdivision. You can see where the subdivision takes place. It's a half-acre lot in the A110 zone, so everything is in compliance. Nothing has changed since the original plat was approved in terms of zoning or sites or situations and utilities and such. The only conditions of approval is to satisfy any remaining engineering comments, which I don't think there are any, and this other one of removing the concrete park strip. Again, here's their utility plan. And then this is the provision for the consideration of time. That being said, we do recommend approval. This will give the applicant one more year till June 3rd, 2025, or 2026, sorry. Should be 2026, sorry.
That is through 26, not 27 then.
Right,
That's what you mean.
26,
Okay.
for the applicant to record the subdivision. So
Okay.
I think the applicant is also online. Susan is online if she has any comments or if you would like to hear from her. Are there? Oh, she was earlier, she's not now.
Okay.
But are there any questions for me?
Yeah, any questions? Nope.
All right.
All right, thank you. Since the applicant doesn't appear to be available right now, we'll go ahead and move on and have any discussion by Planning Commission.
This one makes sense to me.
Looks good.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve item 4.1 with staff's 2 recommendation with a change of the date to June 3rd, 2026 on item number 2.
Okay, we have a motion by Heather and a second by Forrest. He beat you to it, Daryl, sorry. So we'll do a roll call vote. We'll begin with Heather.
Yes.
Forrest.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Adam.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
And Andrea.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. Okay, by way of information, we're going to do a little bit of a switch here. We've got 2 items that are covering the same, a similar situation here with these 80-foot tall wireless cell towers. We're going to have one presentation for both items 4.2 and 5.1, and then we'll move on to the public hearing associated with 5.1 and have a vote on that, and then we'll move to 4.2 for a vote there. Before Michael, because of that, this is up for a public comment and a public hearing, so I'll go ahead and just read the public comment policy and procedure. The purpose of the public comment is to allow citizens to address items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form and present it to the city recorder. In general, the chair will allow an individual 3 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized representing a group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes, and this policy applies to all public hearings. All right, Michael, we'll go ahead and let you introduce these two items for us.
Thank you. And as you mentioned, there are two different interrelated items, and there will be two different presentations. I will give a presentation just on the general kind of procedure, and then the applicant will make a presentation on the proposed text amendment, the rationale, and also the proposed site, if the text amendment is approved, what they are wanting to do under this new regulation. We talked a little bit about this during the administrative, or the work meeting. The applicant is Mark Williams, an attorney who's representing different interests in this property. That is the subject of the conditional use permit. Again, the conditional use permit may or may not be warranted pending the outcome of the legislative request. As the commission knows, you hold a public hearing tonight, make a recommendation to the city council for consideration. The commission has an opportunity to modify what is before you. You can make a recommendation of approval or denial. Either recommendation goes to the city council for final decision. You can also, if it's warranted, if you feel unprepared in making a decision, the commission knows you can make a decision to continue this item. We mentioned that that could be done for our next commission meeting, and this would still flow to the same council meeting because our council is not meeting a second time in July. This would be on potentially the first council meeting in August. But again, we encourage you to make a decision if you feel you have received enough information and can make that decision tonight, that recommendation. Quickly, and the applicant will share with you more detailed slides, but these are a couple of images from their conditional use packet that's in your materials. This is an existing C2 commercial site where there's already been commercial development on this property. This is near the Redemption Bar, also near Mountain View Corridor, and you can see Academy Parkway that leads to the north to the Zions Bank Stadium. There's also residential development to the east of this site and south. And then, yeah, just highlighting that small area that is going to be impacted by this. It's not going to displace any parking. It's a very small compound in the project. It'll be fully screened with a masonry wall at the bottom and does allow for co-location, which is typical for future arrays. We encourage those co-locations rather than having multiple sites within the city or stealth solutions. This is the modifications that I had identified in reviewing the proposal. One thing I want to put on the record is that the applicant worked very well and carefully with the city's retained and outside legal consultant who has a special knowledge about the wireless industry. As we know, communications is a federally regulated and protected industry, and anything we do, we need to make sure that we're complying with those FCC regulations, which are cited within the proposed amendment. So there are certain things we need to make sure we're still maintaining compliance with on a federal level. And our legal consultant representing the city's interests ensured that this ordinance did that. In fact, I believe you'll hear from the applicant's attorney tonight that most of this ordinance was drafted, I think, by our legal counsel and was shared with our applicant's attorney. And so there was a mutual drafting and negotiation to arrive at the tool that is presented before you tonight. Again, the main objective of this tool is to potentially expand the location of where wireless cellular sites can be constructed in the city. Currently, we restrict them to public and quasi-public properties. This would propose to expand them to non-residential properties within the city as well. So commercial industrial sites, not residential, would be non-residential only. It expands the standards. I put in your packet a copy of the materials that are currently regulating this type of land use in the city, and I think all the regulations fit on 2 pages. And so the benefit of this regulation is not only are we ensuring FCC compliance, but we also have a number of standards for other types of communication devices within the city. I also, I believe, included, reference the 5G regulation that the city has. That regulation sits outside of the zoning code, or what we call the Land Development Code, Title 10. That's a different section that I had as a link in your packet. This largely does not change that regulation. It just references that we do have 5G. We may have an applicant who comes to the city and wants to do improvements in both 5G and a wireless monopole or stealth solution. So we do want to make sure those 2 sections of our city code work together, that they're consistent. And that speaks to that first recommended modification, is that we just adopted a new city code. As you know, we just recodified everything. And because that effort was ongoing, the proposal from our lead consultant did not put it in a codified format. And so before this goes to the city council, we will update that, make sure it's consistent with our recently adopted city code. So again, these are the modifications that I have recommended. I've shared them with the applicant. I believe they're comfortable with them, but if they want to speak any further to these recommendations, of course, they can and you can. Also, you know that you're at liberty to identify additional modifications if you feel like it's warranted. And of course, everything that you recommend still would be forwarded and subject to city council review and approval. With that introduction, do you have any particular questions for staff at this time?
I don't.
I know that I think all of you have been in a meeting where we have either reviewed and made a decision on, administrative decision on some type of cellular service, whether it's a co-location, maybe an upgrade, or even a new site. We typically have tried to encourage stealth applications. This is going to be a lot for all of us to take in. Again, we invited this applicant to help us better understand kind of the current industry trends and standards, as well as we want to make sure we're maintaining compliance with the FCC regulations. So with that, yeah, it's up to you how we move forward. So.
Yeah, okay. No questions there? All right. So this is, again, the presentation for item 5.1. I think it'd be okay to go ahead and move on to the presentation now for 4.2. And so I believe the applicant was going to do that. There was no, anything that you had to have?
High-level overview on both
Yeah,
of mine.
on both of
He'll do
those.
the same. He'll
Okay.
have one presentation on both.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Turn the time over to the applicant at this time. Go ahead.
Good evening.
Yes.
My name is Mark Williams, and as Mr. Malloy said, I represent Skyway. With me this evening are Rocky Schuster and Larson Quick, who are with Rage Development. They're the consultants that helped start this process and came and talked to Mr. Malloy and his team. So, Commissioners, thank you for having us. Mr. Malloy and the staff and other officials, we really appreciate you letting us speak to you tonight about this, your code. Well, first of all, about Harriman City, about your code, and about this application. And that's what I'd like to talk about. Ultimately, what we're going to ask you to do is to approve the code amendments that have been presented to you, and then also to approve our application subject to the legislation being approved by the City Council, so that way we can move forward with building this facility. The presentation is, I will concede, a number of pages, folks. And so I don't want to be talking at you the whole time. I really would prefer a conversation. So I'd invite you to please jump in, ask a question at any time. If I'm going a little too fast, or too slow, you tell me. This is your bailiwick. You make the rules. I don't. So I want to make sure that I comply with how you want to proceed. So with that, let's see. Here we go. So I wanted to start with the Harriman City General Plan. When I've had the privilege of being before many commissions and city councils throughout the western United States, I will tell you that the general plan that you put together in 2022 is probably one of the more comprehensive ones that I've seen. And I always look at these because it's important to determine what the community is thinking, what their thought process is, what their policy is, where they want to go with their legislation before we try to plan a facility so that we can do that and make sure that we're complying with those. As Mr. Malloy indicated, you know, the idea behind the code was to make it compliant with the FCC regulations. I'd go one step further. It was also intended to make sure that Harriman has more robust standards when looking at these facilities and determining whether you're going to permit them in your good city. And so what it provides is a lot of general requirements that will be required in terms of how these facilities will be built, height, you name it. It's much more comprehensive than it was. And that's not a knock on the old code whatsoever. It's just as times evolve, as Harriman City has evolved, and as Mr. Malloy indicated, you'll have newer codes, and so it's time for other things to evolve. And so from that perspective, this provides more meat for the staff to be able to review an application. The requirements for an application, which we'll go through a little bit, are much more comprehensive than they used to be and much more comprehensive than many jurisdictions that I'm in. But the interesting thing about the Harriman City General Plan is it's quite comprehensive, is you called it transgenerational, which I think is important. You know, as somebody who just got his Medicare card, and I look at, you know, my kids who all they do is look at this. When they look for a place to live, the first thing they do is look to see how much service they got. They get their internet through this. And so it's important to really be thinking that transgenerational about what's coming. Because right now we have 5G, which you've heard of. Soon we'll have 6G, which will be able to provide even more help or more technology for jurisdictions. And then with AI and then soon to be quantum technology, we in the wireless industry are really looking at quantum technology to be able to help that as well. You also had a list of priorities. And listen, there are many priorities, and I did pick out some. And the really cool thing is that you said we'll consider how best to support the creation and location of smaller business spaces. Throughout a lot of cities and towns, you'll have, you know, small businesses use their wireless service for all sorts of things, for their credit card deals, for whatever. And it's very, very important that they have it. I think we can all agree that small business is the engine of this great country and nothing else. And so being able to support small business spaces, to support attracting and diversifying the types of businesses and employment opportunities, and then to evaluate the cost of fast-tracking installation of fiber throughout the city, which now can be wireless if need be. And so you are thinking ahead when you plan this. And what we want to be able to do is to help achieve that by having a facility which will provide 5G coverage in the area. As Mr. Malloy indicated, there are residences around that area. There are businesses. You have Zion's Stadium, which holds many thousands of people. You have the Parkway there, which has a lot of travelers. And as the staff report indicated, there have been complaints of poor service. And as we'll show on some maps here, that's the case. So why are additional wireless facilities important? I think you have this presentation in your packet. And these are some statistics which are fairly recent. And it really just supports what I just said about at least my kids using these devices. But really importantly also is a lot of us during the pandemic went home to work. I went back to work, but did a lot at home as well, but it really drove home the need to have robust wireless service. With 5G now, you can have home internet service if you want. So the folks in that area will have that. The traveling public will have it. And those who are using Zion's ballpark, our stadium, will also use it. As we all know, when you go to a sporting event, what are we doing? We're taking pictures or videos and sending them to our friends or sharing them. That takes up a lot of bandwidth. And so having a facility there will really help. It's also important for first responders. You know, 80% of 911 calls are made by a wireless device. That's just from a statistic from last year. And as you can see, the amount of data traffic has increased threefold from 2018 to 2022, and it's only continuing to increase over time. The cord has been cut for the most part. A lot of home buyers, as I said, will check. Those in my kids' generations who are in their 30s, whenever they go someplace to look at a house or an apartment, the first thing they look at is how many bars they have. And that's an important part, and an important part to have for value of a home. And a lot of people are still studying at home as well. 82% of voters say wireless is important in driving innovation. And one of the things that you talk about in your general plan is innovation, and is to have an innovative city. In many ways, that innovation can be technology, it can be also a way of life. And by having these mobile devices, all of those plans, all of those desires, all those policies, all those objectives are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they can work together when you have a lot of wireless capability. So, and you may already know this. If that's the case, I apologize. But wireless facilities so far still have to have facilities that are up in the air to be able to transmit. And so one of the things that wireless facilities have, not just antennas, but they also have fiber. Because, so there'll be fiber going to this site, which will then go to a master switch. And all of this happens in nanoseconds. And as you get further along in the technology stream from 4G, then to 5G, then to 6G, you have less latency. And so, which is important, obviously, in healthcare, but that's how we have that. And so you have to have certain line of sight to be able to do it, but it's also to be able to go in building. So right now, you know, I have 5G in here, I have 2 bars, so there is some pretty good space here. I purposely did not go on your Wi-Fi system just so I could see that. So it's pretty good in here, but that's important for all of us in businesses, in homes, and whatnot. I've talked about how height affects its service. In the area where this particular facility will be located, we originally was at 100 feet, right, Larson? We brought it down to 80 in talking with Mr. Malloy, and we felt that was going to be good enough to be able to get the coverage. And I have a couple of coverage maps coming. And also to be able to have additional co-locators. I mean, one of the things that this new code has is it will it wants you to have more co-locators on a facility so that you reduce the amount of facilities. And on the diagram that Mr. Malloy showed you, we have the T-Mobile antennas at the top, and you have the ability to have 3 more below that. Given where it's at, it's a little high, so it's just below the parkway. There's a sign, a significant sign that goes up for Zion's Park. It kind of wheels down that way down east, and so I won't say it's quite a promontory, but it's a little higher, so you can have a little bit better better service. So why are more facilities required over time? As I indicated a few slides ago, the amount of data that is going through these devices has been increasing more like a hockey stick. And so at some point, it's almost like if you're at Zions Park Stadium and everybody gathered outside because they're very excited about the game and they opened up the gates, what's happening? It's slow going through there. Well, that's what can happen if we don't have facilities to be able to offload. And so it's a very similar concept. And so that's why it's important to have additional facilities where properly located, and here, like we say, in a commercial zone, with the ability to have more co-locators, will be more beneficial for all concerned. As the staff report noted, there have been a growing number of complaints about service. So how do you do that? How can you improve service? Option one is to add spectrum. Right now, the amount of spectrum that's out there is what we're going to have today. There's really not more spectrum that we can deploy. Any carrier can deploy in this area. We have what the FCC and the government has allowed us to have. Hopefully, the Department of Defense will let some of their spectrum someday that they don't need. But as of yet, that hasn't happened. So there's not any more unused spectrum that we can use. And the spectrum is the airwaves. And you know, Chief Stromberg uses probably a two-way radio at some point. That's going to be at a different spectrum level. He and his team will have not only two-way radios, which will use a little bit different radio waves, but they'll also use wireless services from phones as well. And so it's important that we have those different kinds of frequencies that don't interfere. So if Chief Stromberg is talking on his two-way radio and his colleague is talking to in a cell phone, they won't interfere because of just pure physics. You don't want that to happen. You can't. There's really no more spectrum that you can use. Optimization in terms of where you put antennas and whatnot, that doesn't, or how you shape the antennas, which is called azimuth, which I think is still one of the funniest words I've ever heard. That's how you position an antenna at some place on top of the facility. You can move it. Because the facilities here, as we'll see in a little bit, are farther away, that's not going to help much either. And we need broader coverage to reach all of the citizens and businesses and first responders in that area. So it comes down to adding facilities so that we can have better service in that part of Harriman City. So let's talk about designs, if we can, for just a few minutes. The facility that we're proposing is a monopole with antennas at the top. That's the most common kind. Those can be, under the code that is proposed, painted sky blue or steel blue or whatever to blend in with the background. I was there today. A steel blue would probably work best, but that's up to Mr. Malloy and his team and you folks of how you want that. But then you have things like this tree. This happens to be in a more desert area, and which doesn't fit well. And I'm sure you've all seen trees and other things that don't really fit. I have seen a palm tree on a golf course, which I was privileged to play at a number of times, and I played there easily 12 times before I realized it was a wireless facility. They did such a good job. Those are the two ends of the spectrum. So then you have this thing, which is very large. That's what the jurisdiction wanted. They come in all shapes and form. Some jurisdictions want art, but it needs to fit the particular area, and the least obtrusive, the better, from our perspective. And that's why monopoles can be the least obtrusive. So this is painted sky blue, so this is a monopole. The one on the left is what this one would generally look like. The one on the right shows being a half-mile away. That's a much taller facility than what this 80-foot facility would be. The 80-foot facility will be, at least by my eyeballs, about the same height as that Zion Stadium sign, which had the LED lights, panels on both sides, up above the hill. And certainly there are a lot of other kinds that you can find. Because I'm a wireless geek, I keep a library of these things. So anyway, we get to amendments to the Land Development Code. As Mr. Malloy indicated, we worked really well. And I have to say, I think Mr. Malloy would agree with this, is that we had a very, very collaborative working relationship between me and Mr. Malloy, Mr. Sheeran, and their counsel that they prepared. The objective, I think, was a textbook example of working between industry and government, try to get a solution which is fair to all concerned and helpful to all concerned, helping a community to be able to advance technology while also making sure that it fits within the community as well. And so that's why this came out, and from our perspective, in a fair. Not everybody got what they particularly may wanted, but you got what you need, so it works pretty well. Right now, their wireless facilities are really only located on public or quasi-publicly owned property or on utility sites, which limits the number of facilities that can be placed. Now, again, this is not a knock on the prior code. Remember that since 1999, Harriman's grown quite a bit. And so that's why you all update codes from time to time. But now there is a need for additional facilities. Calls are dropping, particularly in buildings and in vehicles, because it can't see the users as well as it could because of a lack of a facility. Reliable wireless service is essential for reaching 911 and emergency services. I don't want to overemphasize this or underemphasize this. It's just worth really remembering that that's the most important way to be able to call first responders in any kind of an emergency. And to have that, particularly, and this is the first time I've met Chief Stromberg, but I got to believe at an emergency situation, communication is going to be very essential, and you can't have an uninterrupted call, particularly in an area where there's no service. Now, he does have two-way radios, but still, you need to have that between healthcare providers, law enforcement, and all other first responders. So that's why we feel and urge the commission to approve these changes. So the Telecommunications Act of 1996, I put in the provisions of the Telecom Act and what the FCC requires. But I started the presentation with your code because it's really important to think of it that way. This is your community. And yes, the federal statutes require that jurisdictions work with the wireless industry to be able to make sure that we can deploy more facilities so that we can have interstate commerce and international commerce. But it's important that that under the statutory rubric that Congress made sure that jurisdictions do have the ability to be able to regulate aspects of this. And what the Telecom Act says is the biggest one is it shall not prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the provision of personal wireless services. That's, yeah, you're saying to yourself in the back of your head right now, I know it, that this is some sort of legalese that Congress put in 1996, 3 years before that, and you're right. But what it basically requires is that regulation does not prohibit the deployment of facilities when there's a particular gap in coverage or when no other sites are available. And those are two of the circumstances that we find in this particular location. There are other restrictions. I'm not going to walk through those. You can read those for yourself. As I indicated just a moment ago, it applies to filling a gap in coverage as well as densifying a wireless network and introducing new services or improving service capabilities. That's in the 2018 FCC order interpreting the statute. So earlier in my comments, I talked about having more facilities to be able because of the throughput. My example of Zions Bank Stadium, where we're all outside and we're trying to get in at the same time. We need to densify a network so we have more openings to get into Zions Bank Stadium and to be able to improve service capabilities, particularly where, as the staff remarked, that they've received complaints from the public that there are calls dropped, that the service in that area could be much better. And so it's not an insurmountable barrier. It just, when you need to have an operator facility, the law would say that it should be allowed. Now, let's talk about your current code. Facilities are permitted in M1, M2, MU2 zones, and conditional uses in all other zones, save for RC. Now, in the current code, footnote 41, we in the law business like footnotes, and so we look at footnotes, now states that the facility must be located on public or quasi-publicly owned property, as I discussed earlier. And those, respectfully and candidly, are quite few within Harriman City at this point. And we just couldn't make the demands and the needs for service in the area where this site will be located required that it be located in this particular area. And so that's why we chose a commercial zone and the particular factors and characteristics of that area. As I indicated before, certainly Mr. Malloy indicated that it is the purpose of this is to comply with FCC guidelines. But it's really important to note for you folks that it's going to establish clear design requirements in the proposed code. In your packet, you obviously it notes there are height requirements, there are setback requirements. Stealthing is in various places. So the engineering and design standards for all facilities, location standards, those are much more robust than you've had, and so which is important. And then standard conditions for approval are quite robust. So at the end of the day, the code that was prepared by your council is very comprehensive. It's not foreign to me. I've worked with those before, and it creates a good balance. A balance that promotes clear design requirements, which is what you want, and that's what obviously one of the key important things that's important for this commission. And it also allows to streamline applications and city review, which will accelerate improvement of facilities rather than being able to wait around for a considerable amount of time. And so certainly Mr. Malloy and his team are very well versed in the placement of wireless facilities, but also everything else. And so from that perspective, it's protective of Harriman City. This is important as well. The facilities are going to be at least 500 feet from all schools, playgrounds, and at least 100% of their height away from any residential property line. In this particular instance, commissioners, there are residential units within the area. The fall line of this facility will be it's around 200% or more. Is that right, Larson? Yeah, of that. Know that these facilities are built, they're over-engineered and built to withstand very, very, very high winds, fire, and that's not to say that they don't go down, but they're important when there are fires in various places, because a lot of times there's no other way to communicate but for having wireless facilities. I think we can all know from sad news reports that we get of fires where first responders, such as Chief Stromberg and his team, not only using their two-way radios, but also using their wireless devices to be able to communicate with a lot of people and to be able to get assets in the right locations to be able to fight that fire. There are requirements for lighting on facilities. This one would not have any because it's not tall enough, but there are certain structures that you'll see probably on the interstate where they're 150 or 200 feet high. They have to have the FAA lights, so the FAA has some requirements that we have to do that. And then the freestanding facilities will be limited to 80 feet, which is lower than a lot of jurisdictions, I will say. There are some that are lower, but if I had to say on the average, lower. So we ask that this commission pass this code and recommend it to the city council to be passed. And we think that for the long haul, it's desperately needed, and it's better to connect first responders, businesses, residents, and the traveling public in Harriman. Okay, let's talk about this facility, because I know I've been talking a lot, and I need to get done here. I've said it before, so I'm not going to say it again, but there are certain large facilities, Zions Bank Stadium, Salt Lake Real Academy, Salt Lake Community College, SLCC, and Mountain View Highway, where we can provide service. And so there's a gap in service. And and I'll show you this in a second, but that's what we talk about in wireless lore. If there's a gap where you can't maintain a call, then that needs to be addressed with a facility. And this facility will hold up to 4 carriers, which is great because there'll be other carriers that can go on this facility, and residents will have more choices. So how do we go about doing it? So in this instance, these gentlemen here were retained by Skyway, which is my client, and the applicant to, they are told where there's a gap in coverage. And here, T-Mobile retained them to determine, their engineers do a driving test. They literally drive around and have phones, multiple phones in their cabin, in their truck, going off and doing it. No, Chief Stromberg, they're not supposed to be they're looking at their phones when they're driving. They don't, I don't expect, but that's what they do. And they determine where there is a gap in coverage. And then what they do is they have a search radius, which I'll show you in just a second. And then they try to look for places that are co-locations, because we want to prioritize those in any jurisdiction. If there's another facility we can go on, it's cheaper. We have an incentive to do that as well, because it's cheaper, better for everybody concerned, if that's possible. And then they're identified, and then we try to work with candidates to be able to find places. This is the location, as Mr. Malloy indicated. There's the restaurant is, if you're looking on the right-hand side where the proposed site is, right behind you is the restaurant, the Redemption Restaurant that Mr. Malloy talked about. And then you'll see some rooftops right there. The great news is that those residents will be it will not impede their view of the beautiful mountains in the outside. Around where the facility is going to be, there will be. We are told. I can't represent this as fact, that, so if you're looking at the right-hand side, left-hand side one, the dirt on the right-hand side of the picture is going to be more commercial and parking, I believe. So that whole area will be commercial, and where the Redemption Bar and Grill is, that will be commercial up that way as well. So as I indicated, there's this search radius for alternative sites. And the red is the area. It's not uncommon for these search radiuses to be along major highways. And the reason for that is, A, there's a lot of traveling public. B, there are typically, obviously, residences around those places. And there are also a lot of times, a lot of businesses, because businesses want to be right off highways, and sports facilities are typically close to highways. And so that's where this search ring came, and there were a number of places that we considered which are pinned on here. The first alternative was the Providence Hall Stealth Facility, and this just couldn't fit in here. There wasn't enough remaining pole space to be able to put it in that space to be able to do it. There needs to be some separation. So if these are antennas, there have to be at least a couple of feet between them, or else they do interfere with each other. And so you couldn't build it there. There would be interference, and if there's interference, neither one of them could work. The other alternative is some vacant land near SR 85, which is property owned by the city of, by Harriman City. And as we understand it, the city hasn't yet determined how they're going to develop it, but it has no utility services, so it would be very costly to be able to place something there at this point. The RSL Academy, that would be another place. A lot of times we will, the wireless industry will place facilities in school or university parking lots on tops of buildings, but they did not respond to written or in-person requests for meetings. So that went nowhere. The Academy Parkway commercial spaces, which is a space that we ultimately are going to build on, is the one you see there. And then there's another Verizon wireless tower, which also, it was outside the service, the search ring area. So when it's outside of this area, and so we already have good service areas, you'll see in just a moment, and therefore it wasn't the best place. So here's where, for the engineering geeks in the audience, these are propagation maps, which the engineers will create. And what they're determining, based upon the physics of the area and where the current facilities can propagate their signal, that's in green. So you'll see facilities in the perimeter of this diagram, and you'll see a lot of green. And then when you see in the middle there, where Zions Bank Stadium, our proposed site is, the Mountain View Corridor, it's all yellow. So that means that there's marginal coverage in wireless engineering speak. Then if we go, and I'm going to toggle back and forth because I think that's helpful. This is with the facility. You'll see there's without, there's with. Without, with. And so with the pictures of all of those residential areas around there, you can see that it's going to really help a lot of folks, businesses, and others communicate. And so from our perspective, and we suggest to you that it meets the goals of the comprehensive plan. That's why I wanted to start with that. And then I'm on approach here, folks. I'm on approach. Flaps are down. Our seats are up. We're buckled in. It's protecting and promoting public health, safety, and welfare, so residents can always connect to E911. Improving the deployment of high-speed internet technology to drive economic growth, to help small businesses, which are the engine of this great country. and improving property values by attracting new residents with improved connectivity and new opportunities. As we know, there are many home businesses out there. A lot of folks work out of their house, and which is important to have good connectivity. It does comply with the state, federal design and safety standards and with Harriman standards. It's not going to produce any glare, it just sits there. It complies with the setback and siting requirements of the new code. And as we said, at 80 feet, it'll be lower than previously requested and consistent with the new code. That is at the height of what's permitted under the new code. This is a photo simulation. So it's not the actual because we haven't built it. And so you see on the lower right, that's the perspective or the orientation. So it's looking east there, and that's where the facility will be, and that's at 80 feet high. And here's from the other direction so that you can see it down below of what that's going to be. Now that's painted sky blue, and I asked Mr. Quick to do that. It can be painted anything else, and the reason I said painted is because, as Mr. Malloy and I talked about, one of the stealthing requirements is painting. You can paint it all sorts of different colors, but I chose just for purposes of illustration, consistent with the two facilities I showed you a little while ago, to make it sky blue. It also complies with applicable Utah law. I don't need to tell you folks what Utah law is. And it requires that a conditional use be approved if reasonable conditions are proposed to mitigate the reasonably anticipated detrimental effects of the proposed use. And here, those are present. First, it's in a C2, it's a commercial area. Everything around this facility, when built, if built and if approved by you, will be commercial. Yes, there is residential in line of sight, but it's in the C2 area. It's limited to the 80 feet, so it's limited to the height that is permitted under your new code if approved. It'll be painted to be stealth per the new code, and obviously you will work with Mr. Malloy, and he and his team will make whatever suggestions on that, and we'll comply with that. It'll allow for more co-locators, which is a really good thing because it will allow 3 other service providers, and they're going to have to locate something in that area at some point, very soon, just simply because of the growth that we see. I'm not going to continue to say it again. It is a high-traffic area. It will alleviate concerns about poor service, and it meets the new code requirements. So from our perspective, it meets those requirements of the applicable Utah law. If it doesn't, then there will be a violation of federal law because we won't be able to densify the network or improve service capabilities, which is what we want to do. And the Skyway facility that's planned meets the test. As I said a few moments ago, before, that's the gap. Kind of going from northwest to southeast and going east and west, there's that significant gap right there, that yellow. And that's what it's going to alleviate. So from a federal wireless standpoint and legal standpoint, it fits that gap. And it's the only area, only place that it could be placed because that's the only business or property owner that we could put it on.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes, please.
On that exhibit you just showed us for B, it was showing for a 100-foot pole for coverage. So what is the difference in coverage from 80 feet to 100 feet?
100 feet would obviously go farther. We chose to, it's a great question, we chose to have a height which is a little lower. You know, there's that rock song that Mick Jagger says you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you get what you need. You know, that's really what we went back to, because of the comments that we received from Mr. Malloy's team, which were very fair, we went back to T-Mobile and talked about what is it that they really need to be able to achieve what we're trying to achieve here. And they said 80 feet. Certainly, you could waive a provision and go at a higher site, but this is gonna work at 80 feet. Even I know it says 100, but this is gonna work at 80 feet as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Along those same lines, an 80-foot tower, what is the radius of service typically?
The radius of service,
Assuming that the grade obviously doesn't interrupt.
well, it doesn't really. It really doesn't, and I think that what it's going to the service is going to be very close to what you see here. And at 100 feet, would it go a little farther? Probably going farther up north east because it's a little higher, but at 80 feet, it's going to be fit that. I wonder if this thing has the pointer. Ah, okay. If I may, if you see where Zions Bank Stadium is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the area where that's written in just a little bit north, let's say a couple inches on the screen, down around the proposed site, across the highway certainly. So at 100 feet, it would go farther northeast, right? At 80 feet, it's going to get that main area, which is where a lot of the population is right now. So get almost virtually all of the area, not probably 100% of the 100. Most.
So I have a question for you. Why not do 5 small poles instead of 1 big one?
Because of the interference with buildings. And so if we have 20-foot poles, and maybe you're going to small wireless facilities, and I'm happy to talk about that because your code does have that. And if you're going to, and let me answer your question directly, and then if I may. So right now, the area that's in our foreground is not built up yet. That appears to be space that will be commercial at some point. So if you have something that's 30 feet, 20 or 30 feet, which right here it's going to be, if you see the tree line where the pole is on the right-hand side, that's where it's going to hit. So if you have those, you'll have more of those around, and most cities will want to have one versus having a lot more facilities. One will also go to a broader area, as we talked about just a moment ago, and there will be less interference with a larger and taller facility. Does that help and answer your question?
I hear your opinion. Okay.
Okay, yeah, no, and there are others. I mean, so if it's okay, can I address the small wireless facility? A lot of jurisdictions are also, and you do have a small wireless code portion, a lot of jurisdictions are also encouraging small wireless facilities which will be on light poles. And so and what they do are, they look like current light poles, green light poles, and they'll have a light on them, but then they just have a smaller canister up top. Now, to be able to use those, you have to have a macro site. This is what is called a macro site. So from this site, you can also have smaller facilities that will be used and will be necessary when this area densifies. I predict, sir, that when all of this area is built out, that you're going to want to have more small 5G poles, and I would imagine that carriers will want to do that, but they're going to need a larger macro facility to be able to wheel off of that, because that's where the signal will wheel off of that larger facility.
Thank you.
And there, you know, for instance, I've worked on codes and ordinances with cities to be able to place these facilities, and even down to the design of the facility on street corners. I mean, I have one a block away from my house, and it was great, because as soon as it came up, I mean, it's ubiquitous now. You can't really, it looks like every other pole, which is helpful. And I think you're gonna, at some point, that's something that I would recommend that you think about going forward, because if you can reduce the amount of larger facilities like this, then you can wheel off of those and have the smaller wireless small cell facilities. As I've indicated, and I don't want to keep repeating myself, there's a gap in coverage that this is going to be able to alleviate, and a denial of that will have the effect of prohibiting wireless service when in that area, because we can't close a significant gap in coverage that we've showed, and we meet those tests. I've dumped a lot on you, and I really, really appreciate you listening. I hope it's been instructive. If there's something that I haven't covered that would be helpful to cover, I'm more than happy to do so. You know, if there's something else that you anticipated that I didn't, I'm more than happy. I enjoy talking about wireless. I've been doing wireless since 1986 when the first facilities came out in Cellular One, so I've been doing a lot since then, and I really enjoy doing it. I enjoy speaking with commissions like this about it and hearing from you all. So happy to answer any questions or give you any further information.
All right, Mr. Williams, thank you so much for your time. Any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Did you, by chance, talk to SLIC and their campus? SLIC?
Oh, SSLCC?
Yes.
Did we?
Said that we had reached out to them. This would have been a number of years ago, and I apologize, I don't have my notes right in front of me. We started working on this search ring in 2019, so that will just tell you how long we've been kind of whittling away at prospective properties, locations, etc.
Yeah.
And SLIC is not too far from RSL, as I.
Correct.
No, it's very
next door,
close, and they tend to have towers on their campuses, and so I was just wondering if you had approached them on this. And this SLIC campus is pretty new. It's only, what, a year and a half old? So this would have been coming in after you guys had started your process. So, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
I really
Thanks
appreciate
for being
it.
here. Yeah.
So our ask is that you approve the code as presented and pass it with a recommendation to City Council to pass it. And our ask also is to approve our application. I think Mr. Malloy will tell you that we've satisfied all of the requirements of the new code with respect to the application. We have demonstrated in here how it meets your code, Utah law, and federal law, and why federal law requires us to be able to do this. And so we ask that you go ahead and approve this now, subject to the City Council approving the new code when it comes up before them after your recommendation. So that's what we ask you to do now. And the reason for that, folks, is that way, because you've had a presentation, you've seen it, then we don't have to come back and redo it. We'd like to build this before the snow flies. And it just takes a little while, because once it's approved, then we have to work with the building permit folks and all that. And while they're very efficient, it just takes time. And so that's why we ask that you do that today.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, as mentioned, we're gonna tackle item 5.1 first before we move on to 5.2. So with that being said, 5.1 is up for a public hearing. So we will go ahead and move forward with the public hearing before we begin our discussion as a commission. And so at that time, as noted, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing at this time for any comment. And I don't know if we've received anything online, and I'm not seeing any public here in our midst here. So, yes, Michael.
And just for the record, we stated that we had not received any public comment prior to the publication of the staff report.
Yeah.
And since then, since the publication of the report, we have not received
Not receiving
anything
any other
further. Yeah.
comments. Okay. Seeing that there is no public comment, I would like to go ahead and entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
I have a motion by Adam. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Heather. All in favor? Aye. All right. That does close the public hearing at this time. We'll go ahead and open this up for discussion. Again, we're talking about item 5.1 at this time, which is the review and consideration recommendation for potential amendments to the land use code, land development code.
Can we get to the city's code recommendation?
The one that Michael had? Yeah.
Just-
We go back
it's
to Michael's
Usually easier to
presentation.
talk off that than
Yeah.
anything else. Since that's
That had
more of
his,
the,
with his updates that he had in the, yeah, that was a,
Maybe while that's being called up, Mike, if this, if we recommend an approval, is there an opportunity for the council or even the commission to come back and after it's all soaked in and we maybe think of things we haven't thought of right now to build on this code?
Well, certainly, as we have seen, the city has adopted other amendments in the ordinance, and we've said we may be back, right? After we live with it for a while, we may find that we need to clarify something, or maybe something's not working. So certainly, there would be an opportunity in the future to initiate another text amendment under the authority of the Planning Commission.
Adam, was there something specifically here
so
you wanted to go over?
the two things that I am concerned with the way it's been proposed is A, stealth, and B, distance. So again, I'm just addressing the planning commission here. For me, I do think we should tie it to a distance from residents, because again, I'm not saying this application, because I'm not worried about this application, because we're talking about
Right.
5.1.
This is 5.1, which is the change in the code.
I do think the code should have some type of reference to distance to residential, because as we all know, commercial is always next to residential eventually.
Correct.
And I think creating some buffer to make that, kind of like we did with the Real signs and stuff like that, there has always been a lot of the discussion of protecting the residential areas from a distance. I actually, and this is where I'm struggling with this one, is I actually would like to have it be forced more into the commercial. Like, put the pole closer to the commercial, myself. I've seen a lot of stealth that's actually tied to the building of commercials. Just throwing out that idea, instead of having 2 towers, have it on top of one of the buildings or on maybe a monument sign or something like that, tying it into the commercial development as a whole. So that's where I'm trying to think of what distance that would make sense to try and bring it in, not be a little thing in the background.
Let me ask a question regarding that, because these are modifications, Michael, that you were suggesting to the code as being presented. Is there any requirement in the larger code right now that would address Adam's?
There are setback provisions, and you may want to ask the applicant, specifically
on
on
the
that.
code.
Yeah,
I thought it said it had to be at least the height
100%.
of the pole.
The height of the pole was all we
Distance
had.
from residential was all.
And I don't know if
so-
that's enough.
Well, so he
That's
mentioned,
kind of what I was
Yeah,
thinking. Is I think it
right,
needs
that's
to
the
be-
minimum we've seen, yeah. We need to have that maybe 3 or 4 times the
You
height of the
also
pole.
mentioned 500 feet from a school. Is that state law, or is that just?
Well, the weird part is if
Yeah.
it's supposed to be 500 feet from a school, how do we allow the Providence Hall, the Harriman High, all the ones we've done? How do we, like, to me, that's where I don't, personally, the 500 feet from a school, I mean, I know of 6 that I could rattle off right now that are on school property.
But is it away from the building? Maybe that's more of the 500 feet from the building, not the property.
But is that what that?
I don't know if that's.
I don't know if that's how
what
we
code
were
says.
proposing it, because it said from school property. So that's where I think clarification there may need to be cleared.
Yeah.
So the current ordinance for monopoles, which again, this was in your packet, distance between a monopole and a residential structure shall be at least 150 feet unless the planning commission determines a greater distance is necessary. And then there's another standard, it says every effort should be made to keep a monopole 100 feet from a public street.
So especially where, not saying that this, again, I'm not going to the conditional use they're proposing, I'm going to
The code.
the code. If we really think about that with where we've migrated to much higher density units, you could be really close to a monopole very quickly if we don't think about those distances. And so that's where I also am concerned that when we say we want to put it on public and quasi-public spaces, if we're limiting the 500 feet, I don't know, aren't we kind of making them not go to public and quasi-public spaces?
Right, and does that limit the ability of the residential designated lots that are adjacent from, from being residential in the future?
So, I mean, for me, what I was kind of thinking when I was coming up with this, and again, I still want to talk about stealth. If I was just to go by distance, I think we would probably want to tie it to the structure like we already tied, but maybe think about that a little bit tighter, where we may say, within a commercial application, you need to be 100 feet from the commercial buildings, but I'm just throwing out a number here, and maybe 300 feet from a residential. Again, don't know if that even complies, just thinking of some type of number that would make sense to try and bring it closer to the commercial buildings and farther away from the residential. Because that's kind of what we've done, like if you think of the school one that we just did in Harriman High, where they turned it into they tied it into their stadium lighting.
Yeah.
Like that actually is like what we should try and shoot for, as well as trying to maybe think of when Mountain View does turn into a freeway and UDOT puts in those really, really high lights in the center. Those would make much more sense for cell phone ideas than, to me, a true cell phone.
Right.
So
That wouldn't be the requirement of 100 feet from public street as well, but yes.
correct. And that's where, to me, the public street concept is something that we need to really think about, because I don't know why we would want it not to be by the street
Well,
versus,
my concern is if there is a failure and it falls, you don't want it to block in the street
fair.
as well. So maybe you do, maybe all these heights are tied, or the distances are tied to the height of the pole. For instance, maybe it's 1.5 times the height of the pole away from any commercial or residential street, or 3 or 4 times the height of the pole away from residential.
From the structure or something like that.
From the structure or something like that. So you can
Right.
tie it that way so that
It's still a discussion of distance, no matter
Right.
what you base it on, so
Right.
I think that can be fleshed out. I think the stadium lights at, what school is that, Mountain Ridge? Were a lot taller than 80 feet, so,
That we didn't get them on there.
Correct.
That's where.
correct.
And that's where I want to figure out a way to start to incentivize, so that's why I don't like the 500 feet from the change that's being proposed. From the way I read it, Mike, and maybe I'm not clicking, but we're saying to
500
not,
feet,
to be 500 feet away from,
Well, let me read this ordinance.
Okay.
The draft is, no wireless telecommunication facility shall be located within 500 feet of any school, playground, or park unless a finding is made based on technical evidence acceptable to the reviewing authority that the absence of its deployment would have the effect of prohibiting personal wireless services. So meaning that there is an unmet need, right? There is a gap in the service.
Yeah.
And therefore denying that location would have this unmet need. So we could still allow something, within, closer than 500 feet to those.
But it's a facility, not a property. It's, right.
Yeah.
It's not the school property
So,
that has to be 500 feet from. 'cause
Again, you
that's
might
the-
say, well, if there's
the-
not a need for service,
Right.
then you might say, well, then why do we want one at all?
but
Right.
that's, but see, I even struggle with the need for service, because the need for service for T-Mobile customers, not the need for service for other
Well, not necessarily, because we do allow co-locations, right? If there's an existing location,
Agreed.
then,
But what I'm saying is the service map comparison, again, I'm just using you as an example. That's only showing T-Mobile's coverage impacts, not other entities. So I would argue, yes, maybe that cell phone provider. What I'm worried about is if we start comparing, if everyone has to have the same level and they don't want to do a collation. Currently, there's nothing in the ordinance that makes them co-locate, correct?
currently, we require that in constructing a monopole, there has to be an allowance for a co-location.
Correct,
right?
but if
Allowance, but that doesn't
But
mean
if I
we-
start Adam
yeah.
Jacobson Wireless right now, just making this up, right? If I can't come to terms with their agreement, there's nothing in the ordinance that makes
True.
us go to their pole.
Except unless you just can't find another site, right? Kind of, the market kind of forces you to come to terms,
And
but.
I think the market is
yeah.
what will drive this.
Right.
If it's
Another thing,
economically-
just point of order, just remember the applicant has an opportunity to address you following the public hearing. I don't think we've done that, so.
We haven't, but we
obviously,
didn't
if
get
you
any
have
comment
any
either.
comments,
Yeah,
right?
we didn't get any comments from him to respond
nothing
to,
to
so
address
there's
it.
nothing more to address unless we have a question, then I'll ask the applicant to come forward and then at that point. But yeah, it's a fair point.
So I'm saying when I look at a little bit on whether it be this app, again, we're just looking at the code, whether it's this or another cell company or whatever, I don't know how we say your coverage map doesn't meet coverage map, so therefore we're violating. I'm just saying when I look at the justification of we're violating federal code, I don't know how we can say that that's 100% true. Now, I'm not saying that we have to have flexibility here, but that isn't a one-for-one term in my point, in that you have carriers that all the time that ride off of each other anyway to make sure they have a little bit of coverage. So
I would suggest that they probably have a better understanding of the legal application of that phrasing, because that is from reflecting case law. So I'm sure you could ask the applicant to clarify.
I don't know,
they
I mean,
believe the
that to
intent
me
of
isn't
that.
something, I'm just more, it's not to me worth worrying about it one way or the other. I was just saying, is there something in our ordinance right now that requires the next cell phone company to go on this pole? You think yes, I think.
Well,
is it
I'm
yes
just
or no?
saying it's market, right? We require that they provide it, they allow for it.
Correct, and
and
none
then
of
it's
us are supposed to think of anything related to cost, because that's the council's
us.
job, that's not our job, right? So I'm just trying to think that through a little bit out loud, because I get we need cell phones, I'm not trying to say that at all, but I think we have to make sure it makes sense to what we're approving.
I don't know how all these things work, but I will say that co-location is a typical requirement, and it gets used. I mean,
They come
to
terms.
have
Even though
that
they're competing,
opportunity
they come to
to
terms.
locate, and whoever owns the facility wants the co-location, because that increases their revenue stream from the infrastructure that they've already constructed.
Even if it
So they're
is-
motivated to have.
Even if it is AT&T instead.
They're motivated to have a co-location.
And I would say even competitors, it's probably more economic to piggyback on their pole than it is to build your own.
Absolutely.
So I think the business end of this will take care of itself.
So, oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. The only issue I had with the wording here was, under item number 6, the sentence that begins with public or quasi-public. It talks about properties that are unavailable or inaccessible. To me, that doesn't seem defined very well.
So, and if you read this out of context, I agree, this is a little bit, and I added this location preference. So if you look at section 6C1, the original text said property designated non-residential unless otherwise prohibited pursuant to. It doesn't say that our location preference is public and quasi-public properties. It just dropped that from the conversation. So that's when I suggested that we rewrite it with location preference is first, public and quasi-public properties. Property designated public or quasi-public. Anyway, then you
I
then you
agree.
go on. Yeah,
I
that's
agree
why I offered to rewrite that.
Personally, I like that. excuse me, because we do want it on that public or quasi-public property first. You know, unfortunately, in this location, there's not an opportunity for that, but that's really what we want.
Yeah.
Is that to stand, and then if that's unavailable, then it is allowed, and they could prove to us that,
And
you know,
I'd
that's not.
probably, I would keep the unavailable, but probably drop the inaccessible.
Oh,
You can make anything accessible.
true.
Thinking like an engineer there, Commissioner Fan.
He's a surveyor. It's okay.
I also think, I still think we need to protect a distance somehow. And I'm trying to think of that, and I'm having a hard time doing it today, honestly, is like, what, is it 4 times? Is it 3 times? Is it 2 times? Like, I don't think it's the length of the pole,
It's not the length of the pole.
but,
You need to have a factor of safety.
but it's a
on that,
factor
yeah.
of the pole, and so that's where I'm struggling, that I think we need something related to that. I do think we need to talk about the actual array itself. I've noticed that there's often times when on a monopole, they're really close and you hardly notice it. And then there's the times when they're like 4 feet off and you really notice it.
Yeah.
And so I do think we should think about that, as well as what we mean by stealth. To me, I do not, since I can be honest, I was the one that helped create the ordinance originally. Stealth was not paint in our minds at the time.
Right.
And so that's just something that I think we need to think about, what we really want to do for stealth, where to me, sometimes creating a monument does make it noticeable. Like, that's why I kind of like the idea of pushing it more into the commercial. So you're kind of entering the commercial area and it's like a free billboard, for lack of it, because we don't allow billboards. That to me promotes that sense of community, and people just don't know that it's a cell phone tower. And that's kind of like to me, that's a good thing, not a cell phone tower that's really hidden in the back corner next to residential, just trying to.
So what you're saying, Adam, is this isn't enough change?
I think so. I think,
That's what you're saying. You're saying
We
that
need more
we need
clarification, more
more than
definitions.
what's being changed here.
Yeah.
Correct. Because I feel like in some areas we're opening and some areas we're closing in the opposite directions that we want. Like, I think we should try and promote public and quasi-public first. Then if you can't do that, then maybe we allow some of that with it, maybe a little bit stronger, I'm just making it up, a stronger way to hide it. That makes it why you're gonna do it in the commercial. And we'll stay a certain distance away from residential property lines and structures and stuff like that. But I don't see any of that here.
Like, what is the definition of stealth in the code?
It's not defined in the current code, but it is in the proposed amendment.
In the proposed amendment,
Yeah,
I think
so
that's what we're
in your
getting at.
packet. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you look that up?
Yeah.
Do you have that handy so you can help
While
us?
while you're
There's
looking
a
at that, I
lot
did
here.
want to say, again, the proposed amendment under 6, bullet point 6, does kind of what you're saying, Adam. It says, the preference is public and quasi-public property. If that's not available to meet service, then it would be a conditional use with those, when those 2 conditions are met, the next 2 bullet points. And then all the other standards still apply. All the other regulations for either stealth or monopole would still apply. And all the mitigation requirements of a conditional use permit would still apply. And the setback standards that are proposed in this amended code are really similar to what I read you in the current code. They're not really changing that much from our current regulation. We currently allow as a monopole 50 feet, and then the planning commission can approve an additional height up to, I think it's 100 feet. This one caps out at 80, so they're actually bringing that down. It's 50 feet, and then it's 80 if it meets certain criteria as a maximum. So those metrics are pretty similar to what we have right now.
Except for we don't define what we mean by stealth.
Right, and this
Concealed or
new code
disguised.
does, right? This new code has stealth definitions and standards.
And is that the section
7.7F,
7F?
stealth elements.
And I think that's probably where I'm struggling, Mike, is I'm hopping between the summary, and I totally get it, and we're changing a lot, so. Again, just my opinion.
That doesn't define stealth, though.
Stealth facility means a wireless communication facility designed to look like something else other than a wireless tower or base station. Another thing that this code does, and I mentioned it here in my corrections, is that it talks about stealth, concealed, and disguised facility. And really, concealed and disguised facilities are the same as stealth. And so I was just asking for a clarification under bullet point 7. So you'll see all three of those terms in this draft ordinance. So anyway, so again, it's in there and those standards are there. And it's, as the applicant stated, it has far more standards than we currently are operating with.
And I guess what I'm struggling with is, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, this is not our actual code showing what's being struck out and not.
No, this is a
No,
whole new
right,
code.
this is an amendment to their proposal.
And that's kinda
But
what-
in
that's
your
kinda what-
packet, I gave you all of the sections that are regulating wireless or.
What you're looking at there, that's the
Yeah.
new code that they're,
Gotcha.
that's not the current code. That's what is being proposed. to
I guess for
replace
me
that.
to understand it a little bit more, I would like to see,
Correct.
kind of like how we do it when we modify. This is our code. I'm redlining and adding and taking in and out. So I guess that's where I'm getting confused on. We're having to go back and forth to compare it.
Yeah. So if you look at the last attachment in the text amendment packet, that is the current code. Those last 2 pages, attachment B. I gave you like relative definitions, land use categories, the standards for a monopole, A through H, and then the zoning. I did an excerpt of the zoning table of where they're allowed. Now, again, if you want to see that bullet point number 1 is saying, let's take this draft and show it in context of the codified ordinance. That's kind of what you're asking for, Adam.
Correct.
We could certainly do that.
And then I
We
also.
will do that. I'm going to do that for the city council, but if you want to see it first, we could do that.
I personally would want to see it. I don't know about everybody
That makes
else,
sense.
But then I also still think we need to address stealth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, to me, stealth isn't paint.
Yeah, I know. I think that,
Agreed.
and I think that's the one thing that's a little confusing is you have different definitions of stealth within the text that you're proposing. And one of them clearly, emphasizes paint and durable paint. And so I think that for me as well, I think stealth does not mean paint in any way, shape, or form. And so
Well,
I think,
I can appreciate my compadre's opinions, but why does the military paint their planes a shade of gray or something that makes it harder to see? To me, harder to see is stealth.
yeah, but those are moving.
Is it what?
I said, those are moving.
Well, even that, I mean, you take galvanized steel light pole, they're difficult to see at distance as opposed to a painted,
Right.
blue
You get the
painted pole.
utility boxes that are all painted with some mural, and I mean,
That's art.
That's
That's
pretty.
art
That's
at that
art. I
point.
mean-
That's not stealth. That's art.
I mean,
Yeah,
you
at
could
that
paint it
point.
like a bush if you wanted.
But I actually think there may be, and this is where I've been trying to think about, is stealth a certain height? Like what you're saying, I totally get, but after you go past a certain point, we start to require, we flat out say, we want stealth from, I'm just making up a number again, 30 to 100. Those are when we need stealth. So we have some guidelines to enforce versus, kind of depends on how we feel and what do you mean. Like stealth to me in the case of, I think it was Mountain Ridge or Harriman High, when we put them in the street light, or in the lights, those actually
Harriman High.
you can't see it because they're already there. That to me was stealth.
But then at that point, it's within 500 feet of a playground.
Correct.
And not allowed.
And that's where
No,
That's
right?
why, that's why they have the exception.
But,
There's an exception for the 500 feet.
all right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Maybe
Yeah.
it's better
But I-
less defined so that we can define it on a case by case.
Well-
Because what works here may not work in a different setting.
Right, but if you set a standard at paint justifies stealth, then all of them are just gonna come to us and say, we'll just paint it. There's no reason for them to go a step higher to actually hide it as described in 7.3 or 7, yeah.
Correct. Like I almost could see us saying, you know, if it's really, really far away and no one's ever going to see it, then maybe stealth is not needed. That's kind of what I'm trying to say is, but right now, we're not quantifying when it's advantage and when it's not. It's just, and it's
Yeah.
probably because I'm not seeing it in one code style reference where I can say, okay, go add this section and we can actually move forward with, add a comment C to what we're talking about. But we're trying to compare a recommended approach, not seeing what it's actually going to change our code to. That's
Well,
what I'm
if
struggling
you're
myself.
getting hung up on the word stealth, and replace that with a concealment of some nature.
And that's what I'm trying to say is maybe we come up with, you could conceal, meaning paint,
Or
a
some other
facility
surface treatment.
between 30 and 60 feet, but after 60 feet, it needs to go to stealth unless it's close to a school. I'm trying to see how we could add those functions in it, but right now, the way I'm seeing it, I don't know how to add those in. So,
So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of sounds like most people are moving, well, at least Adam and myself are looking at putting forth a continual or a continuation for further research and information.
to provide more clarity for coming
Yeah,
back.
more clarity in comparison of the old code and the new code.
So should I just make that be?
Before we do that,
So if you look at
yes.
the definitions in 4S and then 7F is engineering and design standards both talk about stealth and gives you a list of items of how you would describe stealth, but it's not just limited to those.
Right.
So that kind of gives you an idea without, you can't list everything all the time, so just so you have that for whether you continue it tonight or make a decision.
In terms of stealth, so we dealt with this when I was in Ogden, and, you know, like, you could always establish, like Adam, like you were saying, you know, what are the criteria for when you need to require stealth? Does it have to be within so many feet of residential? You know, in an industrial area, do you really need to have stealth, or in an area that, you know, maybe doesn't need that kind of application if there's a lot of other obstructions for views and stuff that, you know, adding stealth to that really wouldn't make sense. So I think it does make sense to come up with a list of criteria when and how to apply stealth.
And that's what I would love to do right now, but because we don't have them codified where I can say, okay, I'm having a hard time hopping back between what we're proposing to change it to, what our current is, so we can say, okay, add that section here and
Well,
put
and
that
I
section
think
here.
what we're looking at, though, is these are modifications to what is being proposed. I think we can kind of almost go away from what the existing is. If we can look at what is being proposed
Our
tonight,
current ordinance, for
and
example, the only criteria that states stealth application is that it says stealth application may be considered.
Right.
But it's not, you know, with that language, it's not even a requirement. It's just, you could look at doing stealth, and there's no shall that really
Right.
requires it. So
Right.
I think, you know, our current ordinance now is fairly simple. This would be a whole.
yeah,
a
current
whole
ordinance is
debate.
2 pages. This is 30,
Correct.
40, so
I guess I just don't know where to put it in the current, in this,
the proposed.
on the proposed, like how to define that.
Well, yeah, as was mentioned by Matt, it's in 7th, what was it,
Yeah.
7F?
7F.
Yeah, but
don't know if
even
they have
those
that
areas
there.
can be a little refined a little bit more.
Well, that's the point. We can make that and just say, look, we need in 7F, you know, we can continue it. We can make a motion to recommend approval as is or deny, or we can make a motion to recommend approval with these changes. So if we can come up with the changes, and maybe there's not enough time in this meeting at this point. But if there's a clarification, and I don't know if, you know, on the stealth definitions, if you look at those, if there's something in there that you don't agree with or you want clarification on, we can make that as a part of the motion,
I guess that's where, to me,
you know?
there's not enough because stealth right now is just saying paint. And
Well, that's number 7. That's 7 of the, there are other,
And that was my
7F.
well, I guess 6 and 7.
In 7F6, it says painting. It is all I'm trying to say.
Right.
Where,
But you could say, I don't agree with that, take that out as a part of the recommendation.
good point.
Remember, we
We can continue, I'm
come
not saying
back
that,
and-
but if there's a way the,
But I'm saying,
Come back and edit this.
we look at ordinances related to how many chickens to have in someone's backyard for 4 months. Here, we're trying to make something big change, and we're like, we got to get it done
And we see-
today.
and,
That's all I'm trying to say, is this, to me, is
if
a
we don't feel like we can
big
get it done
deal.
today, let's continue. But with.
With direction.
With direction,
Right.
exactly.
Correct, and that's the challenge I'm struggling with, is trying
Yeah.
to give enough direction.
Well, it sounds
That's
like
clear.
the challenge is our definition of stealth. I think maybe they've heard enough on what we're looking to see in stealth, and then come up with a recommendation on some distances as well from residential. Those are the two hangups I see happening right now.
Conditions for when stealth would be required, what stealth applications are appropriate in
Yes.
certain situations. And again, like you said, the definition of what stealth means.
Correct.
Did we also want to look
Andrea,
at the, maybe the size of the array too?
And the array.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I guess one other, to Daryl's point earlier, I do also wonder about the threshold for what we have written here in 6. If we are wanting to encourage public or quasi-public properties, and then it says are unavailable or inaccessible within an area, I mean, what is the threshold that they, are we talking, that is a pretty loose definition,
I
frankly.
think inaccessible, that word could be removed because it's kind of all encompassed in unavailable.
Unavailable.
Oh, and
I'm
it's
with you on
just-
that one.
And even just unavailable, so are we talking it's unavailable because they want it within this 100-yard area?
Or they want it for
Or
the
they
certain
want it within a
price.
4 square mile area?
Or is it unavailable because they haven't received word back?
Or
from
is it
anyone
unavailable
through
because
their-
yeah, that just
you know,
seems
that's-
pretty broad to, how do you quantify and determine, yes,
Unavailable
they've
because
met
it's
that
inaccessible.
requirement in order to make that conditional use apply? That is one concern I would have. is-
Well, at that point, then that's a conditional use, and we make that determination.
Exactly.
Right.
Based on,
Maybe
based on
it-
what I'm hearing tonight in this application, maybe other than Slick, maybe they haven't been able to reach out to Slick,
Right.
there's not another available
Yeah,
site.
I'm not necessarily
And
saying.
I'm
that
just
they're
saying,
not.
I'm just,
Right.
that's an example. That is an example, and it's clear for us to
Yeah, I don't
to
want to,
define
I don't
that.
want to talk about 4.2 yet.
No, I'm just
We can
saying,
talk about
that's an
4.2
example.
after this, but
That's,
yes.
that's an example, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I got you.
So if we,
And I think we can make that determination if it's unavailable
Or-
or not.
or to Adam's
If
point-
they come to us and they've
Yeah.
provided all
Or,
that.
or to Adam's point, the absence of facilities deployed would have an effect of prohibiting personal wildlife services, to his point of, well, are we talking for a specific provider, or are we talking, because again, that is a broad concept as well, that,
But if there's, my opinion there is there's no other facility for anybody else, then there is a lack
That
for
is a-
all facilities.
that is a problem, right?
Potentially. But the one that they're saying happens to be out of, again, looking at the T-Mobile presentation, which
Right.
we're not looking at right now.
We're not looking at.
But that does weigh into the situation because they said the Verizon pole that's on the Jordan Valley is just barely outside of the zone they're talking about, which to me, it almost leads to believe, do we need to have something in our ordinance that says we need to have a minimum acceptance of 2 bars? I'm making up something again. 2 bars, and that's acceptable. Because everyone would argue you always want more bars than none, right? And so that, or a diminished capacity. So that's where, I don't know how to incorporate that myself. But that what I worry about is as we build more structures, everybody's like, well, no, I need my pole. Nope, I need my pole. And then you end up with lots of poles.
I'm not significantly worried about that, because I think
Market will
market
drive
will
that.
prevent that. I just don't see, why would you build a new pole when you can come to an agreement? And I do see the need for more opportunity. I do see that it is a little bit prohibitive in the aspect of, only on these public or quasi-public lands, and that area clearly does need service. And obviously, even from the map, other areas need service that may not have as many options.
Yeah,
So I
mine.
do think we need to fix some things here.
Clint, did you have something you want to clarify?
Yeah, so the applicant, then this is at your discretion, but if the applicant feels like he has some clarification on stealth and some requirements for stealth, if you'd like to hear his comments.
I suppose. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing. No, I want to, yeah.
We're
no,
only addressing it related to the ordinance.
to the ordinance of 5.1 right now, not for the 4.2 situation, because I think we
That
all.
seems wise.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that in a minute. Yes, I'll give you a few moments to go ahead and clarify for us.
I think this is a great debate for everybody. All I'd ask you to look at is, if you look at section 7, it talks about, I suggest that you look at it as a whole, because it starts with basic requirements. It talks about materials, et cetera. Then it goes to stealth elements. And it says that stealth elements and techniques should be used to blend the facility with the surrounding materials and colors of the support structure. Stealth elements include, but are not limited to, the following. And as was pointed out, then there are 8, because it goes on to the next page. And then under K, there's also some support structure and some stealthing statements. But the point being, folks, is that this is much more robust than you've had. It's more robust than I see in others. And what it will allow you to do is to give you flexibility to determine what stealth works in a particular location, rather than dictating it something. Second, because I only have a few moments, as the chair said, in terms of residential areas, I note that the way that 6C is either as in the proposed code or with Mr. Malloy's modifications, the proposal is to incent facilities other than in residential areas. And so as proposed, it says the facility's preference shall be given designated non-residential. And then Mr. Malloy's proposal, it does bring in back some of the public or quasi-public. In other words, reading it as a whole, it's taking it away from residential for the most part. And then the setback does require at least 100% of the height of the pole from any property line abutting a residential zone district. Now, I would suggest that out here, you have a lot of wonderful, beautiful apartments out here with a lot of people. Could you put that on top of an apartment building if the apartment owner would want you to? But you may have to have a facility that's higher than that to be able to use all of them. And so the way that your counsel and Mr. Malloy drafted this is to give you the flexibility to be able to determine that in your work. And so I just wanted to point that out.
One question for you before. Adam brought up the array and the.
Yes, sir.
You know, is technology allowing those to get tighter around the pole? Because you've seen some, as it was mentioned, that are large around there. Maybe you could address that. And
Yes, sir. Typically, they need, at least in this, to be able to get all of the area that I described, they need to be in multiple sectors. Those need to be about 5 feet, so to have 2 antennas a pop. So you can move those in this particular facility. We can move it in on this facility a little bit. And there are, as Commissioner Jacobson said, some that are right next to it. Those, I will tell you, in my experience, there are more poles around the area. That's dedicated to a more particular area. It's almost a higher small cell than anything. And there are those facilities that are around 60 feet.
okay, so being able to go a wider distance, a longer distance away from the pole allows a better coverage then, and,
Yes,
and
sir.
fewer poles overall.
Yes, sir.
So the tighter they are, you may have to have closer, more frequent poles then.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I wonder if we would allow the applicant to discuss kind of the market forces or trends on co-locations. There is
Yes.
some suspect that maybe if we provide it, how do we know that?
Yeah,
it'll
would you
actually be
mind
used?
addressing that part of the discussion? That'd be
Yeah,
great,
so
thank you.
again, I look at your, at the code as drafted by your counsel, Mr. Malloy, and I read it to incent co-location. And that's why one of the reasons, that one of the things that Mr. Malloy and his team asked is that when we asked at 100 feet, we wanted to have a co-location. This can have 3 co-locators because it's up at a higher level, and therefore it can address. So if Verizon's going to want it, because Verizon's far away from there. I mean, I'm not speaking for Verizon, but it will. Getting to your precise question on market forces, there are a lot of times when people just won't allow a facility or don't want it on their facility because they're going to redevelop it. There's a place near my house that moved one because they wanted to redevelop it. But in this instance, you have a compound of 10 by 40 feet, and it will allow, and so the area where T-Mobile will need its facilities right next to the pole, there can accommodate more places there. So they're going to, rather than having to build their own pole, so hiring the consultant to do all this work, and then to find a location, come before you, and get that done costs a heck of a lot of money. That's well into 6 figures. Plus, building a new facility can be $600 to $1 million. Am I right, gentlemen? And sometimes more, but it's around $600 to $1 million. Whereas if they can come and co-locate on this pole, then they're paying a rental for the pole and for the lease space, which will be a portion of the lease payment that we're already paying. So from that perspective, they're incented to try to find something that they can co-locate on. I hope that helps answer your question.
And this is just anecdotal, but I have worked on projects where a desired service provider wanted to co-locate on a pole that the facility wouldn't allow or accommodate the co-location. It was better for the second carrier to navigate a contract to rebuild the entire existing pole to allow for a co-location versus trying to locate another site. I mean, it is so difficult acquiring these sites. If there's an opportunity to co-locate, it just seems like the way the industry works, they'll do that every time. Because it's just so much
We will always
easier.
look for a co-location before anything else. And so let me just end with this, is that I think your debate is an excellent one, and you may desire changes, but the code that's been presented to you with these amendments is A, very comprehensive, and B, malleable to be able to consider all of the types of circumstances that may come before you, which is happening given the growth in your city and where and how it's growing, what's being developed in certain areas. And so, as is, I think you have a really good proposal. Thank you for letting me address it.
Thank you.
This whole ordinance really is the new ordinance. I mean, we still have that one, it refers to 1029-8. I mean, that's not necessarily going away. I mean, this is just the whole ordinance. We just don't have anything else. So, I mean, we can do that. We're going to do it. I have to write a codified version of this, but the new ordinance with these amendments really is the ordinance.
Okay. Quick thought, go ahead.
Would you allow me to just add quickly to the co-location conversation? Is that okay?
That's fine.
Rock Schucher, representing Skyway Towers. Thanks for the discussion tonight. This is awesome, and Mr. Malloy, for your work on this this ordinance change. Just to add to that quickly, and as Larson, my peer, mentioned, we started working on this search ring for T-Mobile in 2019. T-Mobile desperately would love to be on air with the site today. They would have loved to have been on air in 2020, right? So we're 5-6 years later. There's a lot that goes into those 5 years, but just to add to what Mr. Malloy mentioned regarding co-location, we really started with the Providence Hall structure that Verizon built, and that I don't know if you guys were commissioners at that time when it was approved, but we spent the better part of 2 years trying to figure out a way to co-locate on that structure. We couldn't do it. For a number of reasons, mostly space constraints and structural issues. So once we turned away from that, we started reaching out to, going through the code, public, quasi-public, and as we've demonstrated tonight. So
I have a
Adam,
question on
you want
that.
to ask a question? Go ahead.
Related to that, is
Yeah.
there something that we should enhance for to make it so, hindsight, if we could rewind back, because I was the one that actually required that stealth, my question would be, if we would have added 10 more feet, you would have been probably able to I'm trying to figure out, is there a way that we could put something in the ordinance to make it so, like, I know you guys are trying to keep it at 80, but if we went to 90, now magically we can get 3 co-location sites to try and incentive, almost to make it more logical to co-locate, like in the case of the Providence one you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, because.
So what could we have done for that one to allow you to?
Because the irony, I do remember, they said they would co-locate there. So that's what I'm trying to.
That's why you're struggling tonight. Well, part of it.
Exactly, is because.
you were told that
I
they would
remember
co-locate.
because we talked about what the look would be on the next screening of the stealth box, because I think they brought in the stealth that they did on one of the Baptist church down on like 78 South, where it basically became over time it looked like a monument, and the discussion was if you would have went there, what would the next stealth covering look like back then? So that's what I'm trying to say is, what can we do to protect us to make it a little higher, or put in co-location spacing requirements that makes it so that the industry does actually use the same poles?
So height, great question. Height for sure helps. Height is the most important thing. You have a similar issue with Harriman High School with the stealth structure there.
That's why we have a light pole
Yeah.
concealing.
And so the issue, I mean, frankly, stealth is really difficult in our industry for co-location. And that's why traditional monopoles, what you have at the entrance to the Jordan Conservancy District, that's a standard monopole, which is essentially what we're trying to propose here. Stealth is just really difficult. So like trees work because you can go elevation wise, you can keep going down, you can stay within the branches. Fake clock towers, that it kind of does turn into a monument because of the bulk, right? The bulk at the top of Providence Hall, I would assume, is probably at least 12 by 12 square. And then you have tower legs that go to the ground. You're just going to continue that bulk 12 by 12 continuing down, vertically. So, and anyway, it's difficult. And then you end up getting something you didn't ask for. You're trying to do stealth, and then all of a sudden you have a huge mass from top to bottom. So it's tricky. I don't know if I didn't answer your question or give you any good ideas. But
what could have happened to get you there? Was it just height? Was that really the issue?
So
To be able to have you
we
locate
worked
there?
with Verizon's engineers. In fact, Larson Quick.
Step up and
Yeah.
speak to that. Larson Quick, also representing Skyway. So that structure particularly, the problem we had was there was a few. Structurally, it failed when we ran a structural analysis, adding all of our equipment, all the mounts, all the stealthing that would be required. So then we looked at modifying the structure itself, which was also prohibitive in terms of costs and what would be required. And then the other problem is that structure, it's a 4-legged structure, right? Each of those tower legs is metal. Metal and RF signals don't work well together. So when you try and put antennas on the inside, you're shooting out into those 4 corners and you screw up your whole signal. The reason that Verizon was able to get away with that is they're at the top of the tower. Those 4 support structures end, they're on a platform and they're above them, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So we weren't able to figure out, we worked, like Rocky said, a couple of years, honestly, we went back and forth engineering over and over and over, trying to make that thing work, and it would not happen.
And that's where
Yeah.
that's why I like.
So then, thank you.
Yep.
Is that, yeah.
The stealth question, to me, still is kind of the root of the issue here, right? Is how do we hide it but not hide it and still make it achievable, but
And allow co-location.
exactly, that's what
Yeah. Okay.
we need to think about.
All right.
Maybe just to finish, when you do require stealth structures, especially those with mass, you need to have the structure designed specifically to be able to accommodate, multiple carriers going up and down. And so we just can't use those structures. They weren't designed appropriately, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So again, thank you. Co-locating to encourage it. If we're
Correct.
going to have stealth, we have to.
But that's where I think we need to
Yeah.
put it in the
We need to
ordinance,
put it
that
in
they
the ordinance.
actually
Absolutely.
design it for that, because again, I remember them saying, yeah, we could probably get 2 more arrays there, and now we can't.
You can't.
So,
Right, and maybe if they had not used metal legs and just had a center pole with wood legs on the outside,
Yeah.
that could have.
Whatever it may be.
Yeah, there's-
Whatever it is for stealth,
Yeah.
if we're going to require stealth, we need to be able to make sure that we're providing for co-location.
well, and when somebody said the monopoles that have the palm trees, I went and looked, and I've seen some that the top is a palm tree, and then the next array is a big net around the next array, and so
Yeah.
I think we need to look at it totally, and that's why I think continuing it, so I'm going to make a recommendation to continue this item
Hold on.
without date is my motion.
You want to make a motion
I do
right
wanna
now?
make a
I was
motion
going to
right
give opportunities for a couple others to comment if they want it.
I already made it, so they're going to have to make the decision.
All right, we have a motion by Adam.
They
Do
can
I-
deny it, and we can remake it.
That's right.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Adam, and we have a second by Forrest. We'll go ahead and do a vote for this one. Heather?
Yes.
Forrest?
Yes.
Preston?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
And Andrea?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. We'll continue that item 5.1. All right, we'll move on to item 4.2, which we've already had the presentation on. So we'll talk specifically regarding this location and this conditional use. Considering we continued item 5.1, I would probably recommend we continue item 4.2 as well. That's my thoughts, just because the applicant's desire was to have that approval subject to the city council approval of item 5.1, which is not going to be going to them at this time. So anyhow, any discussion on item 4.2? And I do want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to talk before we jump to a motion.
Just to clarify, so it looks like this one would be located 131 feet from residential? Is that what I'm seeing on the map?
Are you talking to the property line or to the structure?
Yeah, to the property line.
From property line, from the base of the, you're looking at which figure here? Are you?
It's probably close to 100.
Right here, it says 131 feet and 2 inches from pole to nearest residence line.
Yep.
To the property line.
Property on the south.
That's the south one, but the west one's a lot closer.
Oh, the west one's closer?
Or, was it west?
No, the south is the closest one.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and so that was 131
From the
feet, it
property
looks
line.
like,
And I believe 151 feet to the residential structure itself.
to the structure itself. Okay.
Okay.
And to be clear, what we ask is that the application be approved. We understand that you are also passing on the code. We'd like to get this approved so that we can move forward with the construction on it if we can.
Okay.
So,
All right. So that is a consideration. So, okay, thank you.
So one of my concerns, at least with 4.2, is, I'd really like to see kind of it at either Salt Lake Community College or southwest of Mountain View corridor. And the reason for the southwest of Mountain View corridor is because that elevation is much higher. And so
Eventually, you're going to need to pull up there.
you're gonna need poles anyways, because that's all already been
There's
zoned
no-
and.
There's no utilities.
It's all red-
Development and
yeah,
everything else. I
yeah.
understand there's no utilities there right this second, but there's going to be.
But we
very
can't
soon.
make that in a conditional use.
Yeah, that's in
Right, but
8
that's my
years.
point, is that if we just assume, okay, well, we have to do a pole here, well, guess what? They build it up in the next year, you're gonna have to do another pole right across the street.
Yep. That
And-
will be the case, and you can see that from the coverage
Exactly.
map.
Not just because of the increase of the housing, but also because of the topography. And so
So
it
that's where
actually makes
maybe,
more sense to me to have it up on the hill.
that's where maybe having something like that, and even though that's the problem, is we had to make the motion on the 5.1 in order to talk about this.
I know.
Having something like that in the ordinance would sure be awesome
I know.
to incentivize when to not put one in certain locations.
Exactly.
But, well,
I don't think that's feasible, to be honest, because there's no utilities, there's nothing up there, and frankly, they're 5+ years out from any development.
well, and the other thing is you're going to need it in both locations. You're not going to
Right,
be
you're
able
gonna need it in both
to, you're going to need
locations
it in both.
anyway.
That's my
Well, that's why
opinion.
I'm
We can
saying-
ask that question of them, but
That's why
you're going
I'm
to
s-
need it in both locations
That's
to
what I'm saying,
cover,
if you
for
have
the
it
coverage.
Slick, you know, Slick is an ideal location to have it.
Sure.
It's more centrally located, the existing,
Yeah,
and so.
for sure.
And being a college and everything, that they're gonna want that. That was just my opinions, but take them
Okay.
for what they're worth.
No, that's good. No, I would agree, whether or not that was, I don't know if that was even discussed or not, or if that's even a part of this.
Let them.
What's that?
Teasing.
Okay, any other discussions on 4.2? Thoughts on this?
I mean, and I just
This
think
permit
because we have
conditional use.
so many questions still on the stealth and the distance that, to me, I hear you, and luckily we have another meeting before council anyway.
Yeah, council's not going to see
So-
this. They won't be able to see it next week, right? Because that's too quick, and they're not going to meet in 3 weeks.
And we'll meet
So
before
we'll
then.
meet in 2 weeks from now, so we can have some further discussion on this as well.
So I'm more lean on, in this case, we need to continue it so we can resolve the stealth and distances solution from the ordinance side.
Yeah.
But that's,
Okay.
so.
Any other thoughts?
Say it, because you got mad at me last time.
No, I just want to make sure. I think we'll hold off, unless there's any questions for the applicant, we'll hold off on any discussion there. So, okay, thank you.
No, I agree. Let's get forward. I have to say, I think we did a disservice on 5.1 because we didn't give Mike direction. We continued it, but we didn't tell him.
Hopefully he heard. We can do that in our end of session comments as well. Yes. Okay, good. All right. So no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to continue item 4.2.
I have a motion by Adam,
I'll second it.
second by Daryl. We'll do a roll call vote. Start with Andrea.
Yes.
Daryl.
Yes.
Adam.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Forrest.
Yes.
And Heather.
Yes.
All right, we'll continue that item as well. All right, that is our agenda for the day. Are there any comments? Michael, staff, you feel like you have enough information? Is there any other clarifications you want from
I
us?
think so. I think you
Okay.
want to see clarity on the stealth element of this proposal.
With encouragement for co-locating as
Right,
well, if stealth
right.
really does prohibit that
We'll have it
opportunity.
in a codified format, but again, it's all new. It's not like it's
Right, this is-
striking out other very minimally, right? It's
Yep.
just proper code references.
So we'll do a good job of reviewing that prior to the next meeting and coming with strong suggestions for that we can discuss. Maybe even the work meeting before as we go over the
Yeah, we will.
action items. and then-
They can come to the work
Yeah.
meeting, we can really
And,
Yeah.
and,
talk it through.
and for the applicant, we certainly can have
Wait.
you participate electronically
Yeah.
fully if you want to do that, or you're welcome to be here in person
And
again,
we
of course.
we do appreciate what you're doing here. We just want to make sure we're not setting a precedence that's going to hurt us in the future as well. So thank you for your time and efforts, and we recognize the 5, 6, 7 years you've been working on this project. So that does not go unnoticed by us as well, and we appreciate your efforts. So thank you. By us continuing, it's just this is the first time we've seen it. We had questions, and we just want to make sure that we do the right thing for our community. So any other comments? All right, seeing none, as mentioned, City Council will meet next week on July 9th. We'll meet again on July 16th. Looking forward to another discussion on this, and potentially a joint meeting on the 30th of July, but that's not going to be the case. Okay, it was on the agenda, so that's why I
I
wondered.
know,
So, but,
it hasn't been officially canceled.
all right, hasn't been officially canceled, but likely will be. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a motion by Adam, second by Heather. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.